Okay, this is a summary of week 4 where I talked about product and service design. So let's crack on. Okay, so the design part of the transformation process, there's the transformation process up in the corner, and the design part of it includes what we're going to talk about today, which is product and service design, and then the next session, which will be on process design and layout, location and flow, which I'm going to combine those two together. It'll be probably quite a lengthy session next time, but covering quite a lot of different elements. But all these three, as you can see by that Venn diagram there, all link in together and are interconnected. So product and service design affect and have an impact on process design, which in turn has an impact on product and service design, and layout, flow and also location to some extent have an impact on both the others as well, and they have an impact on location, layout and flow. So all three aspects there are interconnected. Okay, so the questions which I asked you to think about for this session were: why is good product and service design important? So please bear in mind that I'm talking about both products, things which are made, tangible objects, and services, which actually is the majority of what societies produce and are involved in, employed in. So service design and product design are both part of this session. I'm interested in both. What are the stages in product and service design? So what processes, parts of the stages do we go through? And why should product and service design and process design be considered together? Okay. So the design of products and services and processes are interrelated. So this is answering that last question in some ways. Okay, so we have the design of the product and service, or service, so something which is being produced. It could be a thing we're making in a factory, or a service we're delivering to customers, maybe a retail service, or a hotel service, or a transport service, or even a teaching service. Okay, they're all services. So they're all designed in some way. They have shape, they have form, they have elements to them, parts to them, and they need to be created, as it says down in the corner there, in such a way they can be, or designed in such a way that they can be created effectively, that all these parts, these elements for the product or service can be put together. And from the other side we have designing the process. So the processes have to be designed in such a way that the products and or services can be created through a efficient and effective operation. So what we're interested in here is that product service design has an impact on process design and vice versa. One has an impact on the other, and the other has an impact on the former. Okay, so I guess the message from this is that when designing a product or a service, one has to take into account both the process by which it's going to be delivered and how that process is shaped, what form it takes. Okay, so one can't be carried out effectively without thinking about the other. Okay, this is a very simple diagram showing that, trying to show that up in the corner there we have in this case a suitcase with elements, parts which need to be produced, and down the other end we have a guy working out a process and the different elements of that process which might be needed to produce the product, and the two are interrelated. Okay, so then I took us on to a little bit about the Design Council's outlines for the importance of design, and I'm not going to go through this in detail. Pretty much in the session I just went through and read these points out. I think they speak for themselves really. One thing I would say about this is that a lot of products and a lot of services are thought through, good ideas, people come up with good ideas without really thinking about how they can be developed, how they can be delivered. And operations is not about the design process itself, or it's about the design process, but it's not about the design itself necessarily. That can take any form. And we have experts in design of products and services who are interested in their shape, their form, and so forth. Okay, operations is concerned with how that links to the delivery of the design product or service. Okay, so what is designed in a product or service? So the way I've done this session is to break it down into a number of questions. I guess rhetorical questions which I ask and which I hope you can think about as we go through. So we start with the concept. Okay, so the concept is the understanding of the nature, use and value of the service or product. So here what we're interested in is what demand looks like. What is wanted by consumers, by people using a service or making use of a service, what's wanted and how do we understand that? What does it look like, that demand? How large is it? How fragmented is it? And how can we create value in the product or service to satisfy that demand? So really this is all about demand. Next we have the package. So a series of component products or services, bits to the product or bits of the service that provide the benefits which were defined in the concept. And here I use the example of a programmer study at the university. So you're all doing a programmer study, you're doing a undergraduate degree in business management or a form of business management. There's one of many variations of that, but the operations management is a component. So the module and every other module you do is a component of that program. So that's the way to think about the components. So the program is designed with a series of modules which form that program, and then those modules are in turn designed. So I designed this module of operations management, and all the modules are designed by academics in this case, and those are components to the overall, in inverted commas, product, which is the service of a programmer study. And then even within each of those modules, there are subcomponents, if you like, sub-operations. And those subcomponents are the specific lectures. And then even within that, you can talk about subcomponents and so forth. And you keep going down and down and down. Now, all these combine together to create the overall package, which is the product or service. And finally, we have the process, the way in which those products, component products or component services will be created and delivered. So the programmer study at the university is a service, a package containing lots of different products. The process for the program is not really very well defined. It doesn't need to be well defined. It's defined by its components. So the modules are very closely and carefully designed, and together they create the overall package, which is the concept, which is the program. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Okay, so maybe we should think about the life cycle of a product or service. And across the top we have, so I've looked at this before, taken this perspective before, and across the top we have sales volume over a period of time, and you can see that increases, and then over time, eventually at some point it will decrease. Then we have the stages of the life cycle of a product. So the introduction stage, followed by growth, maturity, and then finally a decline at some point. And down the column there we have the volume of production, the kind of customers who would be there for a product or service, what sort of competitors we could expect to have, and then from the point of view of this session, the important part, which is the variety of product or service design. So on the introduction stage, we have slow growth in sales, Customers are innovators, competitors, there aren't probably very many. And at this stage, there's a lot of customization and frequent design changes. Organizations are trying to find, will be working up designs around an idea. So there's an idea for a particular service which could be delivered, or a particular product that might be demanded, or which organizations hope will be demanded. And there's variance around the trying to settle on the precise design which is going to be most popular and most in demand by the customers. Okay, in the growth stage, there's rapid volume growth in sales volume. Early adopters are moving into the market. Prices are dropping rapidly. Competitors start to increase in number, and at this stage, designs are starting to become standardized. So there's a number of designs for a particular service or a particular product, and these are starting to reduce down and become standardized, mainly so that production can be ramped up, delivery can be ramped up, and they can be produced operationally more effectively. And in turn, that ramping up of production and more effective and crucially efficient production, so therefore more productivity, means reductions in costs, which will allow the product or service to grow. In maturity stage, sales start to slow. Bulk of the market is now a customer. Competitors are stable in number, and not many new competitors will be coming into the market. And dominant types will be emerging, and those are the ones which will be dominant types of design will be emerging, and those are the ones which will be available to customers. Normally it may be a variety of price points, or providing different features. And then finally, as we get to decline stage, the market needs are largely met, and people are moving on to alternative products or alternative services which go beyond what they had before. The customers are laggards, the people late to the show, as it were. Competitors are declining in numbers because there's less money in the product or service. And at this stage, what we have is commoditization. Okay, so just one or maybe two designs are being produced and commodified and churned out and the focus is not on anything apart from efficiency at this stage. Okay, so you can see that over time design changes to meet the life cycle of a product or service. Okay, so we can think about product or service design as a process, and the way to think about this is the transformation process. So remember I said at the beginning of the course, all things can be understood as all activities can be understood as a transformation process. We have inputs, outputs, and something going on in the middle, a transformation. Okay, so in the middle we have, for product or service design, a process whose performance is measured in the 5 key performance indicators which are listed there. We have inputs, which are transform resources. This could be technical information, information about demand, and time information, how much time we have to get a product or service designed and into production or into delivery so that it can be consumed by customers and beat our competitors. And transforming resources, test and design equipment, design and technical staff who are able to who go through a transforming process. And at the other end we have the outputs, a fully specified product or service. So what I'm going to do is take you through each of these, and I think I'll go through all of them in varying levels of detail. So from the point of view of concept generation, what are we interested in? We're interested in ideas from customers. So marketing is important here. So marketing gains ideas about how products are being used, how services are being consumed, and feeds us back to the design process. So marketing is very, very closely linked to the product and design stage. Okay, so listening to customers on a day-to-day basis. Certainly if you're in a service operation, then that involves regular interaction with customers. Maybe not so much from a production of products viewpoint, but nevertheless there is an interaction with customers, and that is where we can get some feedback. Also look at what competitors are doing. I talked during the session about reverse engineering, essentially a euphemism for stealing other people's ideas. Okay, so you see what a competitor's produced and think, well, that's a very clever idea. Let's see if we can do the same thing. The competitor will probably have patented a product, but it's much more difficult to patent services. And you can say, well, how have they done that? What have they done? Can we copy it? Okay, so let's start with the final product or final service and break it down into the bits which we think need to be put together in order to produce it. A good example is Dyson. Dyson invented the air blades, which you see in toilet facilities, the hand drying air blades. He and his organisation came up with this idea. Now lots of organisations, lots of companies produce these things, and you see all sorts of different designs for that kind of hand dryer in public toilets. Okay, ideas from staff, so people within the organisation, especially those who meet customers every day, will get a feel for what sort of things might be wanted or needed or demanded. And ideas from research and development. So research and development, you can see, is only part of a bigger picture in concept generation. Okay, this is a model or a kind of bit of research from Babcock's book on managing engineering technology. You can see that references down there in the corner. And essentially what they said was that, or what he said was that if you start with 60 ideas at the very early stages, probably realistically you'll only end up getting one successful product out of those 60 ideas. So you can scale it up, 600 ideas, maybe 10 successful products or services, and so on. Okay, there's a number of management challenges for R&D, and I went through some of these. Again, this is from a paper by Nixon and Innes. You can see the reference down there in the corner. So there's various stages to which or various aspects which are involved in R&D, and those are listed down that first column: cooperation, knowledge, criteria, evaluation, business goal, risk focus, cost focus, financial focus. And in each of these cases, at the research stage, the way these are understood, these aspects are understood, is in a more realistically a more soft, loose, less clear way, and then this hardens up when we get into the development stage. So for cooperation, at the research stage, this is informal groups coming together to think of ideas. Later on, this formalises to contractual arrangements and so forth. In terms of knowledge, it starts off as tacit, which is knowledge held in people's heads, and the development stage is to turn that into something explicit. In terms of criteria, they are qualitative initially, and these become quantitative as the process of development goes on. Evaluation is subjective initially, and then as we get to the development stage, this evaluation becomes objective, along with a sense of criteria being quantitative. The business goal in the research stage is about strategy. What's the strategy of the organisation? Which direction is it going in? What's it trying to exploit in terms of demand and markets? And how does our product or service fit into that strategy? In the development stage, is it operationally feasible to produce this product or service? In terms of risk focus, at the research stage, everything's a risk, and so we're interested in the risks of producing something or delivering something. At the development stage, we're much more interested, now we've sifted through ideas, in terms of thinking about How quickly can we get a return on our investment? Cost focus starts off as an opportunity cost in the research stage. Everything's an opportunity cost. We could do this, we could do that, we could do something else, we could do nothing. If we did nothing, we could reinvest that money in what we're already doing and do that more efficiently. In the development stage, what we are interested in is cash flow. How much money can we make from our products or services? And finally, in the research stage, financial focus is in terms of options. And then in development stage, it's in terms of margins. Okay. Okay, so here's a question for you. Again, a rhetorical question, I guess. Why do designs sometimes become bad products? And I talked about a number of examples. There's Disneyland Paris, Microsoft Surface, the one which got a bit of a laugh, which was Clairol's shampoo with a touch of yogurt, and Zune. A number of products for various reasons, which aren't entirely clear, I don't think. They're not really bad products as such. Well, I guess maybe shampoo with a touch of yogurt might be a bad product, but the others aren't necessarily bad products. But for various reasons, they seem to have been a bit of a disaster. Microsoft Surface still there, still being used. I think one of the students in the class, I talked about his use of that product. It's not a bad product. It's a good product, actually. A good idea. But for whatever reason, it's failed to become the moneymaker that Microsoft would hope it would. Disneyland Paris. Disneyland, fantastic concept, fantastic idea. They opened it in Paris, one in Paris, that was to serve Europe, and for various reasons, which have been documented, it's been, in relative terms, a failure compared with the ones in United States and the one in China. So who knows? And Zune, which is I think another Microsoft product, which was supposed to be a competitor to iTunes. Now, I talked in the session. I use iTunes. I use an iPhone, but I use Microsoft compatible computers. And frankly, Zune would be a product just for me, or for anyone who uses Microsoft compatible products, because it would make life so much easier in terms of managing our music and folders and so forth. It works in the same way as Windows, and yet nobody uses Zune. I think it was eventually removed from the market, no longer supported, and yet it could have been perfect for what we need. For whatever reason, we're tied into Apple and iTunes, and lots of people are. So there we are. Anyway, let's move on. So I talked about the role of the customer. NPD is new product development, but it also applies to service development. So I talked about the role of the customer in developing new products and new services. Okay, and I went through some of these here. Again, there's a quote down there, Nam Bison 2002, so you can check that out if you want to. So, customers can be seen as a resource. There's this funny word, ideation, which is about developing ideas. And so I talked a little bit about some issues around customers being seen as a resource to create those ideas. Okay, and some of those are listed there. Customers can also be co-creators. This is particularly the case in services where they are both the customer and a transformed resource. So they are effectively co-creating the service they consume. Okay, so this particularly happens in the design and development stage, where services get specified and become more and more settled and agreed upon. Customers are a user for product testing, service testing, and some issues there which are attendant to that, and also in terms of product support. What problems are there with products? What problems are there with services? Can we get feedback from our customers and then build that into improvements in the product or service whilst it's being sold, whilst it's being consumed. Okay. So in terms of concept screening, there are a number of broad categories for evaluation, and I think 3, and these are listed here. So the first one is feasibility. So we've got a product, an idea, a product, or a service which we are thinking might be perfect for our customers. So the first step is feasibility. Is it possible to do? Is it difficult? Or is it easy? Easy ones are the ones you want to do. Difficult ones, well, what's the problem with difficult ones? They're more difficult to produce, more difficult to deliver, and because of that, they become more expensive. The operation becomes more complex. So in terms of feasibility, what we're really thinking about is the investment. Not just financial investment in terms of equipment, machinery, people, those sort of things, but also the financial investment, the managerial investment. How much time and effort will it take to put together the process, remember I talked about process, the process in order to deliver the product or service. The next one is acceptability. How worthwhile is delivering this product, delivering this service? Is it going to be a marginal thing? Is there a small demand for it, or is it going to be a large thing? Going to be take up a large proportion of our activities as an organisation? Is there a big demand for it? So, in terms of acceptability, in terms of its worthwhileness, what are the returns likely to come to the operation and to the organisation? Finally, vulnerability. What can go wrong? This is really risk. So what risks do we run if things go wrong? If the product injures people, or if the product creates too much pollution, or if the product is legislated against for some reason, or is problematic in some other way, or if the service is problematic in some way, what happens then? And all these go into the overall evaluation of the concept. So this is my little bit of animation. Brace yourself. We start with, effectively, the way to think about concepts is a filter process. So there's a series of screens, and which I've just talked about: evaluation of feasibility, of the risk, of the returns of the idea, and each of these is a screen to filter out a whole load of possible concepts to come down to one which we will take forward as a new idea which we'll take to market. So there we are, there's the animation filtering out all the different concepts, and you get one at the end. You have a final design specification with a large number of starting points and one design at the end. You start at the beginning with uncertainty regarding what the final design is going to look like, and increasingly over time, as you go through this process, we end up with a final design. And often it's a compromise. It's a compromise between how much risk is going to be involved, how much return is going to be we're going to get from the product or service, and how feasible it is. And all these things are compromising together. And can it be done? Can it be delivered? Is there a demand? I talked about a case called Square Watermelons. I won't go into this, but there's down in the corner in grey, you can see the YouTube clip if you'd like to watch that. Really, there they are. They do exist. The YouTube clip is about the watermelons, and really what we're interested in, and what I asked the students during the session was, what market-related questions would you ask before producing Square Watermelons commercially? What finance-related questions would you ask? And what operations-related questions do you ask? So a number of ways of thinking about whether it's worthwhile going into this market. So in order to answer these questions, or in order to think about them, do watch the video and have a think about it. Okay, another example, which I won't go into in too much detail here. This is a case from the textbook about producing a remote mouse for a computer. So it's a very common product now. Now, if you do project management later on, so that's next term. If you do project management, I'm also taking project management, And what we have here effectively is what in project management terms would be called a work breakdown structure. So what we have is a series starting at the top. Where's the product? There's different parts of the product which we need to produce. Each part has its own subparts. There we are, those are the different subparts. And then each of those subparts has further subparts. And you can keep going down, level 3 there. You could go to level 4, potentially 5, 6, 7, 8, until you get to the lowest point, the simplest activity you have, which can then be produced. This kind of thing would also feed into something we'll talk about later in the module, which is called enterprise resource planning, particularly management requirements planning, or which is often called MRP. Okay, so when I come to a session about MRP and ERP, then this kind of structure is used to work out what components are required for a product, equally what parts are required for a service in order to deliver that, and then in order to make sure we have the resources in place so that we can deliver that. There we are, and there's the product. So there's more information on that in the book. If you look into the appropriate chapter, you'll be able to find the case of that. Okay, I talked very briefly, just touched on it again. You can find this in the book. Some evaluation improvement aspects in design. So quality function deployment, QFD, is a common method of thinking about getting the right specifications and the quality issues around those specifications for a product. Value engineering, an idea very much taken from project management. Taguchi methods, otherwise known as the fishbone diagrams. I'll come on to Taguchi methods when we talk about quality management. Right, almost there. So thinking about the process of a product or service design, really you need to think about it as a consumption of resources from which you get no return. So as you go through the process, you're consuming more and more resources. This is an idea again which is borrowed from project management and very much segues into project management. I'll refer to this when I come on to project management. Okay, so in the early stage you have development costs, the costs of producing a product, coming up with an idea for a product, prototyping it, getting it to a stage where it can be produced, building factories in which it can be produced, that sort of stuff. Okay, and then once you get to a stage where it can be sold, you get a revenue from selling it. And you can see that goes up. Now, if you take the sales revenue away from development costs, you get a cash flow. And what happens, the question I pose is, what happens if for some reason the development costs are delayed? Often delayed projects, which is what a new product development is, delayed projects involve more cost and more time. So we have more cost and more time, and then as a result, a delayed sales revenue. I went into more detail about this in the lecture, which I won't really go into here, but I would encourage you to think about the implications of this. And also, what I talked about in the lecture were the implications of competitor actions. So what if a competitor is producing another product, a similar product, and they're in competition with you? Who can get it to market first? What are the implications of that? Just think that through a bit. Okay. Delay cash flow, time delay to market. And there we are. And then a big delay in financial break-even. So stages in design activity include the first stage in design activity, second stage in design, third stage, and so forth. So what we have is a series of stages in design, project stages if you like, and typically these might be seen as linear activities. One follows the next, and certainly in large organisations which are broken down into functions, human resources, design and development, engineering, operations, marketing, all different kind of departments within the organisation, it would often work in this process. Organisations who are more project driven, who are more about design processes, I talked about Apple as an example, will overlay these stages. In doing so, what they do is reduce the time to market. So there's a sequential process, and this is much more of a project management approach here, where we have an overlap in design stages and communication between those stages, which is good. And also you can see there's a massive reduction in time. The issue around this is what you are commensurately doing is increasing risk. So this kind of approach also needs good risk management. Simultaneous arrangement stages. So question, where should the management attention be in product and service design be focused? Here's some stages: knowledge acquisition, concept investigation, basic design, initial test, pilot production, manufacturing ramp up and launch. Okay, the ability to influence the design, you can see, is very great at the beginning and then increasingly becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until you get to the launch stage and there's almost no ability to influence the final design because decisions are made which fix that design into the operations. So again, this is linking the design process with the design activity and design of the product or service with the process design. And yet, interestingly, where's the management activity? Research shows us that it's in the latter stages where you've lost the ability to influence design. So I would argue that maybe, and taking a critical perspective on this, maybe organisations should think about shifting the management part of the process to the early stages and reducing it at the later stages. Sorting out problems early saves disruption later, and here's a little model which tries to show that. So we have a slow time to market. So on the x-axis we have early stages of the total design activity and later stages of the total design activity, so time basically. And then on the y-axis what we have is the degree of agreement over the design decision and changes in design, which is high at the bottom and low at the top. You can see a slow process to market means that you have a relatively high level of ability to impact and create design changes over the period of the design process, even in later stages. If you're going quickly to market, you have relatively low ability to alter designs at the early stages, and then you need high agreement as you get closer to market. Okay, finally a little bit about organisational structure. We have functional management and project managers overlaying functional management. In a typical organisation, you'll have a series of functions which are often found in silos within the organisation, in departments which are separated out both physically, geographically, and in terms of bureaucracy. So there we are. And in trying to deliver a new product or service in this kind of organisation, the process is incredibly slow. It's like a parcel. One function works on it, moves it to another function, moves it to another function, back again. It goes back and forth between different functions. Communication is very slow, very cumbersome, and it takes ages to get to a stage where a product or service will ever see the light of day, if it ever sees the light of day. These kind of organisations have a danger of becoming very sclerotic and focusing solely on what they do best and ignoring new innovations. Here we have the functional management underlaid by project management processes. So project managers are underlaying that and have a relatively weak influence on the functions, but then are there to coordinate. That's a very similar design. Then here we have an overlay. So the project manager is now overlaying the functions, has a lot more control, a lot more power in the organisation. There the functions are becoming increasingly, the idea of that is the functions are becoming increasingly unimportant compared to the project manager, until eventually we have a pure project organisation. And actually Apple is probably the second to last of those. They do have departments, they do have functions, but really they have projects which they focus on and which overlay those functions and which are really crucial. And the project managers in those organisations like Apple have a lot of control over the process. And then we have increasing project orientation. So going back to those questions, can we answer these? I'm not going to answer these for you. I want you to think about them. Why is good product or service design important? Think whether you can answer that. What are the stages in product and service design? And why should product or service design and process design be considered together? I've tried to answer all those questions in this session. plus others, and hopefully you can have a good feel about whether you are clear on those questions. What next week? It's a reading week. We did the reading week. What we're looking at next is process design and location flow and layout. Chapters 4, 5 and 6. Thanks very much.